Greetings from the far side of the galaxy. I'm Fuuri, your host with the most, here to bring you a story about titties. A very popular pair of titties at that. The name of this series is Housamo Heroes, where I walk you through everything you need to know about a certain transient. Be sure to like and subscribe, maybe check out the video I did over Krampus or my Elden Ring top 5s. I'd really love it if you checked out my Elden Ring video because it did, not well, let's just say that. Although, do you know what does always go well? Leaving whichever transient you want next in the comments below. Okay, so slight lie, it's actually the next Housamo hero because the next one has already been decided. Hakumen will be our shining star in the next Housamo Heroes video, but for now we have someone else. Today's Housamo hero is a shy sultan of sandstorms and simps, Seth. Here's your spoiler warning for the Desert Journey, Beachside, and Valentine Coliseum event. Seth is a transient from the world of Aru, the world based on ancient Egypt. We don't know his rule or role, but his artifact is that golden staff. It holds the power to control wind and sands, generating sandstorms whenever he may need one. He goes through Roppongi Academy, and we figure he's a second year, but the game doesn't give us any concrete information. Because Seth is actually pretty unique as far as characters go, I'll start with his backstory rather than his inspirations. You see, Seth is actually Aru's exile, and now you may be asking, who the fuck is this guy? And this guy is actually Ash. To explain something that Life Runners barely explained themselves, Ash was a god from a tribe near Aru. Somehow, Ash ended up becoming friends with Seth proper, and thus began the good times. Seth and Ash went on many adventures, eventually cementing their bond by becoming sworn brothers. Just like the show, these good times had to come to an end when Osiris was moidled. Seth took the blame and got kicked out of Aru, yada yada yada, you know how being in exile goes. And so, Ash took up the mantle of Seth, heir of the desert, keeping it as he was transported to Tokyo. I'll save the rest of his backstory for later so we can finally move on to Ash's or Seth's inspirations. Ash is unsurprisingly based on the Egyptian god Ash, who is in turn based on the god of the Lebu and Tinu tribes. The Lebu are a Libyan tribe from the North African region, which is very close to Egypt, so it's natural some cultural overlap would happen. Ash, their god of oases, got compounded into the Egyptian pantheon as the cultures mixed. That's how Ash became a god of vineyards, the West Nile Delta, nobility, and oases. It was only natural that he would become associated with Seth, the god of the Sahara, and by extension, the West Nile Delta. They consequently share a close relationship in the myths, a very, very close relationship. Some sources say Ash and Seth were one and the same, others say they were lovers. Regardless of their relationship, it's generally agreed upon that Seth and Ash were super duper close. Unlike a lot of other Egyptian gods, or many other gods for that matter, no one can quite agree on how to depict Ash. Sometimes he has a human head, other times he has an animal head, or even multiple animal heads. We can see a lot of influences from the myth in Ash or Seth or whatever you want to call him. Just like in real life, Seth, or well, Ash, was a god of a tribe that was brought into the main Aru pantheon thanks to Seth. The close relationship between Seth and Ash is even reflected by them being brothers. And Ash taking Seth's name is based on them sometimes being one and the same. I may be stretching with this, but the variety of ways he was depicted could be referenced through Ash's many identity crises. The dude spawned 2 shadow selves in 2 different events, and I'm not even going to try and explain what's up with him and Bale. Since we're talking about Seth and his many identity crises, let's finish up his backstory and get into his role in events. Upon Seth's exile, Ash took up his name and artifact, although he still struggles to pull out the staff's full power. Eventually, he either forgot or repressed the name of Ash and his old identity from his mind. He ended up in Tokyo somehow, and in Tokyo he kind of became a punk, leading several gangs that never come up in the story. Apparently, he also became a qualified lifeguard at some point, which I suppose makes sense for an Oasis god. Since he's not from the main quest, let's take a look at his debut in the Desert Journey event. You better sit back and get comfortable because this is gonna take a while. The event begins during a massive heat wave when the summers head to Hakumen's new underground water park. It's a joint venture between Hakumen and Yumao with Matsumara running maintenance. When the player runs into Ash under the name of Seth, he freaks out after recognizing the actual exiled Seth in the protagonist. He does some artifact stuff, whoosh whoosh whoosh, and all of a sudden the resort is replaced with a vast, endless desert. The only people the player can find is Gang Lee and Hanuman when they're suddenly attacked by bandits. Ash, posing as Seth, is the one to save them and bring them to a mysterious storyteller. Christine, or well, the storyteller, tells them to assume the proper roles for this story and slay the Demon King of Gao Chang. You see, the Desert Journey event is based on Journey to the West, with each of the main cast fulfilling certain roles. The player takes the role of the main character, the monk San Sang. Hanuman takes the role of the Monkey King, Sun Wukong, also known as Goku. That's true, look it up. Gang Li takes the role of Zhu Baiji, also known as Pigsy. And Seth is given the role of no one. He decides adopting another role isn't for him. Although, funny note, our God of Deserts would have been given the role of Sha Wu Jing, who also happens to be known as Sandy. Someone at Life Hunters thinks they're funny, don't they? While traveling, Seth and Gang Li make idle talk, and Gang Li ends up challenging Seth to pick up some beach babes at their next destination. It doesn't get to happen because the group is jumped by a bandit, and they take a request from the locals who take out their camp in the mountains. Things go well and they continue their journey to a carnival? Yes, a carnival, and it's headed by Matsumara. A battle ensues, yada yada yada, the good guys win. However, rather than walking to their next destination, a Matsumara treats them to a water slide. Hanuman jumps at the chance, the power of unrelenting horniness gets Gang Li, and Seth conquers his fear of heights. And thus our crew reaches their next destination, the Potted Paradise, which is just a resort town headed by the one and only Thunderbird. Since they're at a resort filled with the best looking mermaids around, Gang Li decides to make good on the challenge he proposed to Seth. Gang Li shoots his shot, he's bisexual, didn't know that, and basically blows his own foot off. Seth makes a pretty successful attempt, but ends up falling flat on his face when he gets a PTSD flashback. Gang Li helps pick Seth back up and tells him to watch and see as he begins to put on a show to attract the beach babes. However, a fight with the lifeguards ensues because using your artifact is prohibited and dangerous. Seth and the player promptly force Gang Li to apologize and clean up the beach before he move on to nightfall. The player is busy with their own thoughts, Gang Li is busy being stood up, and Seth is busy having more PTSD. When it all hits a climax, the Potted Paradise vanishes, subsumed by an arid desert. A doppelganger of Seth shows up and nearly claps the entire party's cheeks until Thunderbird saves the day. And then the player wakes up and the group moves on, finally arriving at Gao Chang. Once there, you find Yumao playing himself. Hakumen playing the role of Gyokumen, so technically she's also playing herself. And Sholat playing the role of Gyokumen's son, Kogaiji. You know how it goes, a battle ensues, the good guys win and Yumao congratulates them for conquering their resort's newest attraction. Yeah, so apparently this entire thing has just been a simple amusement park ride, a quick 3-hour journey to the west themed adventure. Seth is the one to bring up the fact that you nearly died like 10 times, this trip took you 4 days, and you're still trapped in this fucking desert. They realize something is wrong a second too late as Seth's doppelganger makes a return. That desert is a result of a collision of worlds, and now that Shadow Seth is at the center, it's now threatening to swallow everything. The Shadow goes on the offensive, using an endless army of sand duplicates, forcing everyone to make a narrow escape. We then learn of Seth, or well, Ash's backstory. Yumao and the rest decide to take action to stop Shadow Seth without the actual Seth since he's not in a very good place right now. However, thanks to a few kind words from Sholat, Seth bounces back. He wrestles control of the sands away from his shadow and creates an opportunity for the player to save the day. As the collision of worlds ends, so does the event, and everyone gets to have a nice pool day. All in all, it was probably one of the better events. It's long as hell, but I like that it takes the time to show the budding friendship between the main group. Seth's pretty cool, and we also get to know a lot about the exiled Seth, which is more than I can say for the other exiles. An overall solid event, 8 out of 10. Seth does have a lot of appearances in other events, which we'll get into now. His standard units are Valiant 1 type, and his 3 and 4 stars share the same skills, save for one skill evolution. Voyager removes debuff at phase start and gives a damage bonus against 14 statuses. Good skill. When Manipulator applies Anger to himself and all allies on the board, which is useful if your team is being moved, I guess. The Forgotten applies Curse on attack at 70% and always gives him extra CP on miss. A subpar skill, but whatever. And finally, after being hit, Travel Guardian applies Skill Lock to enemies and protection to adjacent allies at 100%. It's a really damn good skill. His skill evolution affects his 4-star's final skill, adding remove debuff for adjacent allies at 70% and a slight heal at 80% when debuffed. I think Seth was made right when Life Hunters was starting to make better units. His skills are good, but they lack a certain something to bring it all together. Up next, we have his Beachside unit, which is a water blow type 4-star. The basic rundown is that our god of oases was hired to be a lifeguard, despite the fact that he can barely swim. He nearly drowned but managed to save himself and someone else with the help of some jellyfish. His first skill gives him extra horizontal movement at 100% and regeneration at 60% after being hit, which could be better. The next skill gives decent HP at 90% and bestows combo at 80% to adjacent allies. That's actually super damn good since he's one of 3 units in the entire game that can give combo to others. That alone makes him a better buddy for Kresnik than Sendayu could ever be. After moving, he applies protection to adjacent allies at 90%, and after attacking, he applies curse to enemies in slash range also at 90%. Finally, when attacking, he removes debuffs at 90%, and after attacking, he nulls debuffs at 90%. This is just a weird skill, just make it 100%, why give him 2 skills that do the same thing? Would you believe me if I said he has another limited unit? It was for the Coliseum event and is an Aether Gun 5-star. The rundown is that Seth was hired to help with Claude's Valentine's Coliseum. The NC had also conjured his shadow again, but it's really not that important. At phase start, he gets evasion at 100%, and he gets vigor to himself at 90% when attacking and a stackable attack up on every turn. Next, he applies dazzle to himself after already being debuffed? What? Okay. And then he removes debuffs after moving. Next, he applies Anchor to adjacent allies at 90% and then Protection to allies once again around himself at 80%. Finally, he gives himself Attack Up at 90%, removes Break from himself, and always applies Protection to himself when debuffed. Jeez, this dude isn't even in the main story and he gets 4 fucking units. Let it not be said that Life Hunters doesn't play favorites. To rate them, I ironically put his 5-star at the lowest, his 3 and 4 stars just above that, and finally his Beachside unit. His 5-star applies Dazzle to himself for some reason when that only gets in the way of his attack ups. He's not even that useful for the Aoyama dungeon since he's a shoot type. His 3 and 4-star units are decent rear supports, but their best skills activate on hit and they don't have any way to heal themselves. His Beachside unit doesn't really have anything going for it either, aside from combo, which somehow makes up for everything else. If I was making teams, I'd put his 5-star with Surtur, who's a solid frontline wall. The same goes for his 3 and 4-star. His normal units are really helped by Surtur's ability to heal and give defense boost. I'd also give them one of the many Akashic records that boost HP, primarily since you don't want them to die. Beachside Seth's movement boost works really well with his role as the team's designated mover, and his bestow combo makes him work really well with anyone who has on-attack skills. I already mentioned Kresnik, but cuase works pretty well too. Winding down this video, we finally have Seth's relationship chart, and just my luck, it's pretty crowded. Agio likes Seth because he's the cool older brother kind of guy. Astaroth dislikes Seth because he reminds them of Baal, and Horus dislikes Seth because he took up his exiled brother's name. On the flip side, Seth himself likes Hanuman and Gang Lee, which, yeah, they did go on an adventure together. And Seth dislikes Thunderbird because he reminds him of Horus, and he dislikes Horus because, well, he is Horus. Since Seth has no loading screens, here's a fun fact. He's associated with watermelons due to them being very popular in North Africa dating back to at least 5,000 years. Specifically a 5,000-year-old settlement in Libya, and remember that Seth, or well, Ash, is originally a god from that area. In conclusion, I think Seth got really good treatment from Life Hunters. All of his units are solid, and the event he's from is pretty good too. Thus, I have to give Seth Fuuri's official seal of approval. Oh, and before you go, why don't you tell me what you want more of down below? Not just leaving transients in the comments, but like, do you want me to do more Elden Ring stuff? Or Minecraft? Or maybe gaming in general? Want me to review furry stuff? Some visual novels? Tell me in the comments. Do be sure to stick around for Hakumen in the next Housamo Heroes video, and as always, this is your host Fuuri, signing out.